Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 neutral eyeshadow palettes. So before we get into it, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel before you leave. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and let's get into it. Alright, so I have done this type of video before, but I do like to update my selections every year as new palettes come out and I discover new things. I just like to give an update. So today I have some older palettes, I have some newer palettes, I have some warmer neutrals, some cooler neutrals, and then I have some right in the middle neutrals. The first palette I had to pull is from Milani, and this is one of their Gilded Mini palettes, and this is in Whiskey Business. I should mention these palettes are in no particular order. I love them all, but this is from Milani, and this is such a beautiful all matte palette. It has every single matte you're going to need. The only thing it doesn't have is a black. I would have liked to see maybe this deep reddish toned brown, maybe a black instead, but otherwise I think this is wonderful. The formula in here is so great. I think if you're looking for a very affordable neutral palette, whether you've been eyeing up, say, the Makeup by Mario or even the new Patrick Ta, but you just don't want to spend that on an all matte palette, this is such a wonderful option. And I always love the look I create with this. I love how easy it is to work with. I've never had an issue with this palette, so I absolutely have to recommend this one. Another mini I have to mention is from Natasha Denona. This is the Mini Nude palette. This one is also just really, really great. This isn't an affordable brand by any means, but her minis are a lot more affordable compared to her middies. So I do have to recommend this one. This one makes it in every single neutral palette video because, again, it is 5 shades. You get 2 mattes and then you get 3 beautiful shimmers. They're so easy to work with. This is another palette that's just completely foolproof, so I can't recommend this one enough. And because it's a mini, you don't really have to think about what you want to do, and I love it for that. So I definitely recommend this one. This is probably in my top 3 Natasha Denona mini palette recommendations. This one's wonderful. The next palette I wanted to mention is from ColourPop, and this is the Not a Box of Chocolates palette. I think this made it in my last neutral recommendations as well, but I just think this is such a great palette. I was wearing this one yesterday and I almost forgot how much I like it. This one does give you a lot more range than the last two, of course, but the shimmers in here are really, really beautiful. The mattes are stunning. They're just, again, so easy to work with and so high quality for such an affordable palette. This is definitely, in general, one of my favorite ColourPop palettes. I like that we can get so much depth from this, but we can also stay very light, very neutral. But again, we can build that depth and we have a really great range of shimmer options to spice it up. But this is probably, again, one of my very favorite ColourPop palettes just because of the versatility, but also the fact that it's so wearable and neutral. So I really do love this. Next, we have a very new palette. This is the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 3 palette. So this is the one he just came out with. And this is an all matte palette. The bottom is more of those cool tone browns. The top is a little bit warmer. This I love. I'm wearing this one today. This one is such a go-to right next to the Milani. It just really depends whichever one is closer to me. I will say the formula in here is better than the Milani. The Milani is not bad by any means at all, but this, this is a very expensive formula, so the formula is a bit better. It's just a little bit creamier, a little bit smoother, and more pigmented. And you also get these creams in here, and you do get a black as well. So it does give you a little bit more versatility, things like that, but this is such a wonderful formula. He did a really good job with the mattes in here. I almost didn't buy this palette because I thought I really do not need an all matte palette, but when I think about how much I've reached for this since I grabbed it, I'm really glad I did pick it up. I have reached for this a ton. I really, really love this palette. I am starting to lose a bit of the embossment in these first 2 shades, which tells me that I go for this palette a lot. I've even used the creams quite a few times for liners. This palette definitely gets a lot more use than I thought. So if you're looking to splurge on an all matte palette, I would definitely recommend this one. Throwing it back a little bit, but still a classic and still such a good neutral option, is from ABH, and this is the Soft Glam palette. So this one has been around for ages. I'm not sure if you can tell on camera, but this one has been very, very loved by me. So this one I think put in my project pan in at the very beginning of this year. And I ended up taking it out because I wasn't enjoying trying to pan an eyeshadow palette. I am somebody who reaches for a different palette quite often, so I didn't like having to reach for the same thing. This though is so beautiful. This is just a perfect palette. I love that we get some little pops of pink. I love that we get this pop of red over here, but then we get these very neutral browns, and then you can spice it up with the shimmers, much like the ColourPop palette I mentioned. I just love the options in here, and I think this palette has been out for such a long time, but it's still such a classic, and it's still one that I reach for. So to have a palette in my collection, as long as this one has been around, and still want to reach for it, that tells me how much I really like this one. I think they did such a good job with this color story. I really think they did. I almost brought out Sultry, but that one is a little bit more glam, and I really tried to narrow down this ranking, so I had to choose Soft Glam. I absolutely love this one. We actually have 3 from Natasha Denona. So the first one is the Biba palette, and this is her all neutral palette. This one has been around for quite a while also. This one I love because we get a very neutral row, we get a more warmer row, and then we get cool tones on the bottom. So with this one, you can really do whatever you want. It's like the Patrick Ta in that you can go a little bit warmer, you can go a little bit cooler, but then you do have these shimmers in here to spice it up. I love that. This palette really doesn't actually have a lot of shimmers. We actually only have 3 in here, which I've always found kind of funny, but at the same time, that's really all you need with this palette. I really love this one. I think she did such a great job with this palette. The Mini Biba is such a favorite of mine. It's not in this ranking because I find it to be a little bit more peachy. When I first got this, I kind of thought that maybe it was a bit overrated, but then I found myself reaching for it more and more, and I realized it's because it's the perfect eyeshadow palette. It really is. I do not like the price tag on this, and that's mainly the issue, but I really love this palette. I want to reach for this one frequently. Again, it's Natasha's classic amazing formula. I am such a fan of her eyeshadow formula, so I really love this one. But I will say, as good as the Biba palette is, I Need a Nude is even more amazing. I will say, I think if you have a deeper skin tone, I think the Biba palette might be a better option, because I do think the I Need a Nude palette is quite light, and I do think the only shade with real depth is this one right here. So I do think the Biba is better for deeper skin tones because you're going to be able to get a lot more depth. However, I still think this is absolutely stunning. I love the wet effect formula she introduced in here. We have a sparkling foiled formula, which is my all-time favorite from Natasha. You get these beautiful, gorgeous, easy to work with neutrals. I have been reaching for this constantly since I picked it up. This is a palette that I want to reach for. It's easy to work with. I know what I want to do when I look at it. You can go a little bit more pinky peach. You can go brown, or again, you can just go very simple and neutral. The shade Sheen actually looks a lot like Space Cowboy from Urban Decay, so if you're a fan of that. It's also a similar formula in that it gives you very much that wet effect. Mia is a beautiful pinky shade, absolutely stunning. I just love this palette. She did such a great job with the shades and the textures. Again, this palette really lives up to its name. This one is competing with Mini Biba for first place of the Natasha Denona palettes. I genuinely do not know if I like this one or Mini Biba better. I've been trying to work that out in my mind because I want to put them head to head in a beauty battle, but I don't know. This one is incredible. And of course, a classic cool tone neutral palette is also from Natasha Denona. We have the Glam palette. It wouldn't be a neutrals video without me recommending this one. This one is a bit more shimmer heavy. We only get 5 mattes in here and the rest are all shimmers. She didn't really play with the shimmer formula in here. It's just basic metallics. There's none of the sparkling foiled. The wet effect is pretty new. So these are all just classic metallics and 5 classic mattes. It's easy to work with. It's beautiful if you love cooler tones. I absolutely recommend this. I think anybody would love this. And if I remember correctly, I think this is one of her all-time best-selling eyeshadow palettes, and it's not hard to see why. This one is really, really beautiful, especially if you love cool tones. I just think this is a classic. The next palette is from Lawless, and this is the One. This is one that I think is very underrated. I don't hear anybody talk about it. I really don't hear much about Lawless eyeshadows in general, but this is so good. So this one does lean a little bit more into those warm tones, and we do have some pinks along the bottom here, but the formula in here is so good. This formula reminds me quite a bit of the MAC eyeshadow formula in that it feels a little bit drier, it's a little bit more buildable, but it's such a great formula. It's so easy to work with. I think this is a really great beginner-friendly formula because, again, it is just very buildable, very easy to work with. I always love the looks I come out with. You do only get 3 shimmers in here, so if you're not crazy about shimmer, you might really, really enjoy this. This is a really, really beautiful palette, and I think it's very underrated. I think Lawless in general is quite underrated. I know their lip products are talked about a ton, but the eyeshadows just really don't get enough love, in my opinion. And finally, I have a neutral palette that has a bit of a spice to it, and that it's probably the least neutral palette I'm mentioning today, but I just think it's fabulous, and I still think it's very wearable for every day if that's what you're looking for. This is from Alter Ego. This is the Mirage palette. So this was designed to be a dupe for the Huda Beauty Empowered palette, and I absolutely love this one. So this palette is a little bit deeper, a little bit more grungier. We do get these golds, we get some pops of purple, but overall, if you really break it down, this is a really neutral palette, very wearable, especially this bundle of 6 here at the bottom. So easy to work with. You get a black in the cream. You also get like a deep brownie purple in the cream formula as well. They're great for liners, and I find that they work very, very well. Alter Ego is also very affordable. This retails for $24. And they did such a great job with texture. I think if you blindfolded me and asked me to swatch these different shades, I would not know the difference between this and Huda. I don't have the Huda Empowered palette, but in other comparisons I've done between Alter Ego palettes and their high-end counterpart, I would say that there are usually some slight tone differences, but overall you get a very, very similar effect. And again, I think if you blindfolded me and had me swatch this one, I really would not notice the difference. This wears all day, it looks beautiful, and I just absolutely love this palette as well. I honestly never picked up the Empowered palette because I wasn't sure that I would actually like it, but when Alter Ego sent this over, I tried it out and I absolutely love it. So it has made it into my top 10 neutral palettes for this year. So there are, of course, some other neutral palettes in my collection that didn't make it into this top 10. And that is just because it has been a really good year for solid neutral palettes. But let me know down below some of your favorite neutrals. Are there any that maybe I should try out? I'm always down to try a new neutral. But that is it for me today. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload at least 3 new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!